we're about and some of the services that we provide. Just for, if I refer to VR, that's voc rehab. If I say voc rehab, that's vocational rehabilitation. It's a mouthful. So we like to use a lot of acronyms, so I'm going to say VR because that's a lot easier. Before I get started, I want to recognize some of the VR staff that are here in the room. Make y'all stand up. Come on, Sharon, Nancy, where's David?
And?
You are standing. No. These are some of our vocational rehabilitation staff. Most of these are here in the Orlando area. So some of the specific questions you may have, I told these guys that they were going to be here to be able to help you all more one-on-one stuff if you have that. So make sure that you can approach them if I'm not able to answer that question. So let's start about voc rehab. What is voc rehab? We are known as the Florida's employment agency for individuals with disabilities. Our mission is to help individuals find a job, maybe keep their job if they're having a risk of losing it, or even advance in their job. And that's a new piece, is the advancement piece. Like a drill sergeant over there. Not to talk loud. So just recapping last year a little bit of what voc rehab did. We closed successful, and that means people who got a job and was able to maintain that job for at least 90 days or longer and was happy with their job and didn't need any more services. So it was about 4,752 last year. I will say that this year we have already surpassed that number, and so we're going to have a higher, well over 5,000 individuals this year. 98% of the people that we placed had a most significant or a significant disability, and we're going to talk a little bit later about the difference between most significant and significant. Average hours worked per week was 28. While this is not your typical 40-hour a week work job, we look at each individual to see what is their abilities and their strengths and how many hours are they capable of working. Because there are individuals who may only want to work 5 hours a week. Some may do 20 hours a week, some may do 40. It's all about that individual. So we don't have that prescribed, you must work 40 hours a week, because it's a very individualized program. Our average hourly wages last year was $11.94 an hour, and I will say that we focus on competitive integrated employment. What this means is minimum wage or above, so we will not close someone successful if they're getting paid less than minimum wage. And it has to be the same wage that any non-disabled person would receive for that same position. Does that make sense? Yeah. And then competitive, of course, means that anybody can apply for those jobs. Okay. So we're divided up in the state into 7 areas. Like here in Orlando, this is Area 3, and Wayne Olson is our area director for Area 3. Okay. We have about 96 offices across the state. We're co-located with our workforce partner, CareerSource, in about 12 locations. So there's an office near you no matter where you are. All right, this is just some stats, just trying to look at the people that we're serving and how many. And this year we have already reached about 50,000 individuals that have referred or applied for services with us. So that number always continues to grow. We've seen about a 3% increase in the number of applicants this year, and that's a good thing because there's so many individuals out there that we haven't reached or don't know about VR. And I think probably most people here have always heard that phrase, VR is the best kept secret. I think it is. And we don't intentionally mean it for it to be a secret. But honestly, if we went out and did a lot of advertising, it's a public service announcement, hey, come to VR. I don't have enough staff to serve everybody. And as a state government agency, you are limited on how many staff you can have. So while we might be the best kept secret, it doesn't mean we don't want it to be known. It's just we don't intentionally advertise nationally or anything because we have limited resources. And that's going to play into a little bit when I talk about order selection. So when someone comes in and applies for services, our counselors, you see it? There's a gnat on me. So when you come in and apply for services, your VR counselor that you're assigned to, they'll ask lots of questions when you come in. They're gathering this information. They may request some existing medical documentation. They may request school records, those kind of things. They're getting a picture of how does your disability impact your ability to go to work, because that's what we're about, is employment. So they're going to look at these functional limitations, and our federal law identifies 7 functional limitations areas: self-direction, self-care, mobility, interpersonal skills, communication, work tolerance, and work skills. Did I get it? It's been a while since I've named all that. Very good. Going back from my rehab counselor days. So that's the 7 areas that we look at, and we're really looking at that person's, do they have a functional limitation to employment in any of these areas? Once we determine all that information, you're assigned to a category. So category 1 are those individuals with the most significant disability. And by law, that has to be our priority. So if we can't serve anybody except one group, it's going to be the group with the most significant disabilities. Don't worry, you don't have to know this part. This is what your VR counselor does, okay?
Based on autism and other stuff.
Yep, it's all based on that functional limitation. So category 1, you're going to have 3 or more of those functional limitations, those 7 areas I talked about. You're going to need at least 2 services that are going to last at least 12 months. Category 2 is a significant disability. So you still have a disability that's causing impediment, but not quite as much as someone who has a most significant. So it's 1 or 2 of those functional limitations. We're requiring 2 or more services, and they have to last at least 6 months. And then we have category 3, which is basically the non-significant or the all other disabilities. And here in Florida, under federal law, if you don't have enough money or staff to serve all that population, then you do what's called an order selection. And Florida has been under an order selection since 2008. And that means that our category 3, which is the least significant disabilities, have to be put on a wait list. Okay? If someone applies for services and they have a job, and they're assigned to category 3, but they just need those services to help them maintain that job, then we will go ahead and serve them. So it's only those people.
I didn't understand it.
Yeah, that's why your VR counselor has to do all that. So if you're an individual that doesn't have as much functional limitations to employment, you may be put on the wait list.
But if you have a job, so let's say you decide my daughter's a category 3, I take her, I get her a job, and then she needs support, then you will support her.
If she has a job when she applies for services, because she's at risk of losing that job, she needs some kind of service to help her continue with that job, and she's at category 3, we will provide that service to help her keep that job.
So if she's already applied for VR now, then that no longer I can do that.
Then what?
Then I can't go out and get her a job now, because you will not give her any services.
It depends on which category she falls into. Yeah. And you can apply for services over and over. We don't have a cap on how many times you can apply for services. So if you've worked with us in the past and you had a job and we closed the case, and it's 2-3 years down the road and that company closed, or maybe they laid off some folks and you lost your job, maybe you moved, maybe you're no longer happy in that job, you can come back and apply for services with us, and we'll start the process over again, looking for that ideal job for you. You have a question?
Well, it's following up what she's saying. You can also sign up for CDC Plus, and they'll take care of them in-home care, actually on-the-job training, also job follow-up.
Yep. Yes, ma'am.
How long can you be on the wait list?
You could be on there until we have enough funding to open that category.
So my daughter is several years from employment. Should I be on the wait list now? Or should I wait?
Yeah. Remember, category 1 and 2 are open. Only category 3 is closed. So the only way you're going to know which category your child would fall into is to go ahead and apply for services with VR and then make that determination.
Okay.
Because it's all based on those functional limitations.
Now, what age did they start this?
We're going to get to that in just a second. Okay? So I know it's confusing, which is why our counselors have such great training and they know all this. The most important thing is you come in and you really talk about how your disability affects your life. How does it affect your ability to work?
Just one quick question, why is it closed now, is there a reason?
No.
Fiscal resources, limited resources.
I see.
Yeah, there's only two reasons we can close a category, it's staff or money,
Yeah.
okay, and we have limited resources. All right, so we're gonna talk about the traditional vocational rehabilitation program, I'm sorry. And I call it traditional because in a moment, I'm gonna talk about a new piece of VR that our federal law put into place in 2014, okay? So with the traditional, a referral comes in the office, they apply for services. This is where that eligibility from the VR counselor comes in. This is where you're assigned to the category. You know, they're looking at your functional limitations. We are required by law to make that determination within 60 days, unless you agree for an extension for a reason, a valid reason. Don't let those counselors fool you. Has to be a good reason. We don't have the right information to make the determination. Maybe we're gonna send you for further assessments, but usually it's within 60 days. IPE development, that's the next part. IPE is individualized plan for employment. The IPE is where it identifies that specific vocational goal. So what is that job and that career that you wanna go for? And then it lists what the services you need and who's gonna provide those services in order for you to reach that goal. So that's where it's so individualized. A lot of times we have people that come in and they're like, well, what kind of job do you wanna pursue? And they're like, well, I don't know, just whatever you got. It's not how it works. We don't have this list of jobs that we just give everybody that walks in. We really wanna get to know the individual. We could easily put you in a job, but are you gonna be happy at just any job? Nope. You want a job that you're gonna turn into a career for the lifetime. You want a job that's gonna fulfill your interests, your skills, that's compatible with what you can do, okay? So in order to determine that goal, we may do some assessments. We may do some situational out in the community job assessments, let you experience different things to find out what you like and what you don't like, okay? So that IPE, we do develop that in 90 days after your eligibility. Then the next part, after we've agreed on that goal and those services, is when the services start. Okay, so whatever the service you need to get that job, that's where that's gonna start. It does have to be listed on that individual plan for employment. It's not on that IPE, we can't provide it, but we can do an amendment. So down the road, we know this always happens, something new comes up, some new service is needed. You go back and talk to your counselor, you talk about why it's needed, how it's tied to the job goal, and we'll do an amendment to that plan to add it. Remember, the key is everything we do has to be connected to employment. Okay? Then, after services are provided, hopefully you get placed on a job, and that job matches that job goal. And after a minimum of 90 days, and I say minimum, because we're gonna make sure that that job is good, the employer's happy with you, everything's going well, and no more services are needed, we're gonna close your case successfully. That's our ultimate goal. Okay, any questions about that process? Yes.
I started voc rehab in Florida, then I moved to Georgia, and in Georgia, it doesn't appear that they offer helping you with education. And so it can be different from state to state?
States have that decision, yes.
Okay.
There are certain things that you can't exempt, like assistive technology, assessments, vocational assessments to determine, you know, your goals and your strengths and interests. There's certain criteria that states can't exempt, but that's one that can be exempt.
If I started in Florida, could I go through Florida instead?
You need to be available to participate in services down here. That's the key to the law. And we do have individuals that come to school here in Florida from another state, but we work collaboratively with that other state. Okay. Yes?
Do you have any extended follow-along for jobs, or is that where you work with a partner to make that happen for the individual?
Yeah, for individuals who are the most significant disabilities, a lot of times they need supported employment and that job coach, and that will follow along. We are prohibited by our federal law to provide the follow-along past a certain point. What's the month, 18 months?
Up to age 25.
for,
Youth, yeah,
For
youth
youth.
could be 4 years. If you're
If-
beyond, yeah, if you're beyond age 24, not considered a youth, then it's 18 months of follow-on.
But what if you have a youthful appearance and mindset?
What if you have a what?
Youthful appearance and mindset.
Well, we'll see how that works. That's an asset to getting a job, though. Yeah. You have a question?
I'm 21 years old, and yeah, you have a good point. I'm 21 years old right now, and I've been in this job, in my job, I've been in Christian Village area, independent area. I do dishwashing, and so they actually threw me in the fire, and they were successful without having things like that. But I had a job coach, but now I want to find out since I'm a job coach. Stop coming to see me. Does that mean my case is successfully closed? Because it's past my age?
Your age doesn't have anything to do with closing the case. And you would have to go back and talk to the counselor if your case is closed or not. You should know if your case is closed because we send a letter to you letting you know that.
I think I'm not sure if I got that, but I
But
think my mom got it.
the key is though, even if your case was closed, if you need more services to help you continue or advance in your job, then you need to come back to VR.
Right, because my mother and I want to go to see the VR, and then I did too, but the Burgers told me last time they could close it because we're going to change job coaches. My job coach never came back.
Yeah, sometimes that does happen, the providers we work
So
with.
I need to get this job coach need to come in and continue doing so long.
If you need a new job coach, I would suggest you contact your VR counselor, okay? Alright. So, remember I talked a minute ago about the traditional vocational rehab and that when our law passed in 2014, we have a new area. So, we're gonna talk about that. The new law, which is the Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act, WIOA for short, it creates 2 new areas. One, we have a dual customer relationship with businesses and employers now, which we should all along, right? We have to have that relationship with them. Now it's actually written in the law. So the other piece, and this is a big focus here, is the pre-employment transition services. You may know that as pre-ETS, but it's pre-employment transition services. And this is for students age 14 to 21. That is the Florida definition of transition student. And we're going to talk about that. So, under the new requirements for pre-employment transition services, age 14 to 21, the law describes 5 very specific services that we provide under the pre-employment transition services. The law also says that we have to set aside 15% of our federal funding for those 5 required services. I gotta catch up with myself. So you have to be a student in school. This could be high school or it could be post-secondary school. Yes, it could be post-secondary.
does it have to be public or is it private or homeschool?
Any of them? Doesn't matter, any of the schools.
Yes.
Yeah, public, private, homeschooled, juvenile justice, any of those kind of facilities. So you have to be a student that's eligible for an IEP or 504 or guarded as having a disability. That means the school, like a teacher or the special ed director, the guidance counselor, somebody could actually just put on a simple letter, school letter, that this student is regarded as having a disability even if they didn't have a 504 IEP. Okay? Most everybody we work with has that 504 or IEP either, but still there's that caveat that even if they are regarded as having a disability, they can still receive the pre-employment transition services. The best part about the pre-employment transition services is you don't have to go through that full eligibility process that I talked about a minute ago. Okay? This is provided to individuals who are potentially eligible. So as long as they're a student, IEP 504 or guards having a disability, and could benefit from those pre-employment transition services, we can work with them. We just need that referral, the name, and the required data that we have to report on, but not the full application. Do you have a question?
If the child is 14 and is in the last year of middle school, will be also?
Yes. Yeah. So,
So they need the referral, the information, and what was.
contact your VR counselor.
Yes,
They'll tell
What's
you what
the
to get.
referral?
Yeah.
What is the referral?
Just contact your VR counselor, your local office, and they
I
will.
did that, and we went to this little meeting, and then what do I do?
Your
From then
counselor.
on, nothing ever,
Did you do
no,
an
I never
application
got
or
a,
anything?
I went and, yeah, I think I did, that's what he
Yeah.
handed me, right?
Sharon. I'm gonna have Sharon work with you then, all right, because
Yes.
it's specific questions, and we're gonna go on. So those, these are those intensive services that we can provide for those, students that are in high school. A lot of folks are familiar with Discovery, you might know that term.
Yeah,
Some folks,
that's what
yeah.
I was looking at.
So Discovery is really like a vocational evaluation. It's really where the provider and us get in there and we get to know that student really well, and they start exploring about the world of work. How many students, I know, I have 3 daughters, and I know when they were 14, 15, 16, they didn't have a clue what they wanted to do. So this gives us an opportunity to really look at what those interests are and what those strengths that they have, and hopefully explore and find out what more is out there. A lot of times we hear students, you know, I want to be a teacher. Why do you think they say that?
That's all they see.
That's all they know, right? That's what they're used to seeing. Or mom's a nurse, so they want to be a nurse. You know, so this allows them to start expanding their horizon and really see what options are out there. That nap. The inclusive post-secondary education programs, that is actually through college, and it's programs for these individuals to attend those universities and colleges. Work-based learning experiences, that's where they're actually going out and working with the employers, trying out those different jobs. And then Project Search. Anybody heard of Project Search? Yeah, Florida really has expanded our Project Search, and we continue to expand every year. But it's a collaboration with the school district, with VR, and an employer. A lot of times it's hospitals, but it actually is expanding beyond the hospitals now.
But
So
you have to
those
do that only
students
through
are
the,
able
it said school now.
I'm sorry,
Because I'm a homeschooler, you said the school, how do I access it?
talk to your VR counselor. Sorry, that's gonna be my answer.
No, that's good.
We're very individualized, that's why you
I mean,
have
it's
to
not
talk to a
closed
counselor.
off to other people, or, is
Do
it
what?
it's not closed off, in other words?
It's not age limit.
No, I mean, like, if you're not in the public, when they
If
say
you're
school, I always feel like you're talking about, go to your school.
Project Search is a collaboration with the school district, as well as VR and the employer. So I'm not
If you're a
100% sure,
homeschooler, how
I'm not
do you do it?
100% sure on that, so we would have to
Or
explore
private
that.
school, how does a private school
I
do
would
it?
think, there are private schools that have done Project Search. Yeah. Project Search is a national model, it's duplicated in a lot of states, it actually started up in Cincinnati, Ohio.
Okay.
So, the pre-employment transition services, as I talked about, potentially eligible, that means you don't have to apply for services, but you can apply for services and still get the pre-eds, okay? These are the 5 required services under the law. Job exploration counseling, so that's when they're going out there and exploring, they're learning about things. The work readiness training, maybe they need to learn some of those soft skills, you know, how to be on time, how to talk to your supervisor, those kind of things, how to get along with coworkers. The self-advocacy training and peer mentoring. This helps them understand how to disclose that they have a disability, how to request accommodations, how to ask for a day off, those kind of things. Post-secondary education counseling, that's those students that are going to go on to a post-secondary program. Not necessarily, it doesn't mean it has to be a 4-year college or university. It could be a 2-year program, could be a tech school, vocational school, those kind of things. Work-based learning experiences, that's where they're actually going to the employers and actually working and learning that skill on the job.
That's what I did.
So, those are the 5 required services under law. And this is specifically those services that are pre-employment transition services for students aged 14 to 21. Yes?
Is this something while they're in school, or is it after school, or?
We actually changed our focus on this year, so It's a year-round program, and the providers are focusing on when the kids are out of school 3 days in a row or more. Because we know when they're in school, it's hard to get them to get out. I mean, they gotta do their classwork. So providers are working on summer camps. They're also, like your Christmas break, when you have the, weeks out, some of them are working on that, spring break, those kind of things. So 3 or more days out, they're doing these intense,
So
focus here.
would the students get it through their school then, or?
Yes, it's through the school and VR, but we have providers across the state. We have 305 employment providers across the state that we work with. Those providers are working with us and the schools. So it's really a partnership between all of us, or the homeschool students. Even if the school's not involved, the parent would be engaged with the VR counselor who would connect them with the providers. Okay. Yes?
I think what she's talking about, most of them are being done by supported employment providers and CIL.
Yes,
Those
they are part of our provider.
Those are the ones that are taking in and providing the summer camp training.
They are part of our provider network. We've got them all across the state. Like I said, there's about 305 different providers across the state that are helping us with these services.
A lot of the providers do change quickly. How do we keep that database, even though we're in COVID, at it?
When you can figure that out, that'll help us too. We know there's a lot of change that happens, and we try to stay on top of that. Y'all gonna hear me keep saying this, but I'm gonna keep pulling it back on our counselors. That's who you gotta communicate with, are those counselors, so they can stay on top of what's happening. If there's a change that happens with someone you're working with, like a provider, we need to know that, because sometimes we don't know that, not as quickly as you all do. So if you come back to us and say, did you know, then we can work to try to find another provider. Okay. So this describes a little bit more of each of those 5 areas, the job exploration counseling. And by the way, anybody that wants a copy of this presentation, Debbie back there has a sign-up sheet. If you would just do your name and email, we'll be glad to send this to you. So the job exploration, some of those interest and aptitudes assessments, vocabulary, situational assessments, that discovery piece, all that is going to fit within this service. The work readiness, that's where I talked about the soft skills, the independent living skills, social skills, self-advocacy, how to speak up for yourself, and speak up the right way, because we all know there's a wrong way, right?
Well, I just put into one with Dale and someone else that I know from that same thing, and I don't know if some of you guys went to that or not. Well, talk to them, and they'll give you more information on that.
Thank you. The post-secondary education counseling, this is for those individuals who maybe don't know what options are out beyond high school, and they may want to learn more about a short-term program, a long-term program. Again, it's them exploring and understanding what is out there and what are my options after high school. And then work-based learning experiences, could be paid or non-paid, but this is where those employers that we're working with are placing these individuals to learn the job and figure out if this is something they want to do. All right, I know we'll have lots of questions, so this is our website, rehabworks.org.
Is that for?
This is the state VR agency, yeah, the whole VR in Florida, rehabworks.org.
Okay.
It has our office locations, numbers that you can call if you need to find the office closest to you. And then for transition questions, which is our student population, which here at Family Cafe, we know we always have a lot of student population. Remember, it's age 14 to 21. This is an email address that will go specifically to our transition administrators who can answer those specifically. So I know we have lots of questions, because VR is very complicated, I will tell you all this. And what makes it complicated is because we are individualized. I can't give you black and white answers because rehab counseling is very gray, but that's a good thing. And I always like to use this example. You have two individuals that come in with diabetes. One individual takes insulin and is not having any problems through diet, exercise. They're maintaining their diabetes pretty well. So they're not having those functional limitations to the job. The second person with diabetes comes in, they're having kidney failure, they're having to do dialysis. They have a real functional limitation to employment. So this is two people with the same diagnosis, but two very different functional limitations to employment. So does that make it better about how not every person comes in is automatically, we have to really look at that individual situation? And this is what your VR counselors are trained to do. They look at that individual and really ask those questions to figure out how is your disability impacting your ability to go to work. Then the fun part starts after you're determined eligible is figuring out, all right, sky's the limit, what kind of job we want to pursue. And then we start drilling down till we find that feasible job that we know that individual's going to succeed in. Yes?
A lot of our families, you know, that micro business that's coming out, and even the Family Cafe is helping to sponsor to where the peer type or the strong family-based businesses that can help tailor to our population will seed all the vendors. What are you guys doing to where if one of our wanted to do that is VR, because it has been my experience that they say it has to be jobs in place, that it has to be that the VR does not really look at family or home-based type businesses or anything like that, that they really steer away from that. I've been deterred from that numerous times every time I've brought it up.
Self-employment is a feasible vocational goal for some people. So self-employment can be supported by our agency, but self-employment is very difficult. If anybody's had their own business, it's very hard. So there is a lot of things that we're going to work on before we ever got to the level to approve a self-employment plan. Because we really have to make sure that individual has the skills and the resources and everything to support that self-employment goal. The home-based businesses, it's allowable, but there's a lot that has to look in that. There's a difference between, and I'm gonna say this the nicest way I know how, there's a difference between a hobby and a home-based business. And we do have a lot of individuals that come in as like, oh, I build birdhouses, I love doing this. And they sell a few a month, they make, $50 a month. That's more of a hobby. So that's the kind of thing we're gonna look at, because remember, at the very beginning, I talked about competitive integrated employment. So we really wanna make sure that even if it is a self-employment venture, whether it's working out of your home or whatever it is, we have to look and say, does that meet that competitive integrated employment definition? Yes?
You didn't cover in your presentation about what happens once you place a client in an employment opportunity. Do you send volunteers? Do you send coaches? What is the procedure?
It depends on the individual. Some individuals start the job, they don't need that ongoing support, they don't need the support on the job, so it depends on the individual. Some individuals who need that support are going to be the most significant disabilities and are going to be receiving support employment and have that job coach in place, like he talked about.
I also want to follow up that as well. Although the age is not an issue, right? But my mother was talking about me pursuing getting walk along and job like a job coach. But when he said, right, I don't think I need it because I've been walking over almost a year almost. At this point, I feel like that they never sent the letter to close it.
Yeah, and I would check with your counselor. Go ahead and call them and see where you're at, okay?
Because I feel like that is to a point that I've been placed. I might stay on to close it, and they haven't closed it yet.
Okay.
They should have closed it.
Okay. And the one thing I will say, anybody that's received support employment services and has that job coach, VR is limited on how much we can pay for job coaching services, meaning the length of time. We talked about earlier, if you were a youth, we can do that for up to 4 years. If you're above age 24 and need that job coach, we're limited to 18 months. However, after we phase out our support, we partner with APD, and they continue with the follow-along services.
How many hours then, or how does it block?
It's
Is it
not
30%?
hours-based, it's need-based, honestly.
And is there a cap, like they're only 30% of that pot? So if she has 4 hours a week, hypothetically, is it only 30% of
I
those
do
4
3
hours
days,
that they
4
can
hours.
support? How does the ratio, or how does that get figured? What are the limitations?
Are you talking about APD or us?
Voc rehab,
Yeah, we don't work that way, the 30%,
Okay, so
I'm not
that's-
sure
okay,
what you're talking, yeah, that's,
okay.
did that to
would be
me, so
APD.
ours is, yeah.
Okay, what is yours?
Again, if they're 24 or younger, they're considered a youth and they need that job coach, we can provide the job coaching for up to 4 years.
So if you've done a discovery process and they are then contracted to do that, then how does that apply? So the agency who did the discovery process, who've gotten to know her, and then they do the job coach, what are the limitations on that? It's individually based up through 18 months?
Yes, yeah,
Okay.
everything we do is individual based. While we may have we're gonna do an initial authorization for 20 hours. You know,
Okay.
that's that initial piece. If that provider comes back and it's justified to us that they need additional supports, we're gonna continue that until it's successful. Okay? Yes,
You're talking about discovery under the youth part. Is discovery available for adults?
yes.
And is discovery available yet in Indian River County?
I don't know. I don't even know where Indian River County is.
Oh,
Yes, it
we
is.
are rural.
Yeah,
It
No,
exists
it's
now.
there.
The training has been completed so that Indian River County can provide that
There's
service
actually
now.
a-
Because last year it wasn't, so.
Wayne would know.
They
Yeah.
just came out and it's
There's
employee.
actually a pilot project running there that concentrates on discovery.
Okay, so it is worth starting to sign up for VR now then, because it is coming down the pike then. Great. Do you have a business card with you?
Yes, I do.
Great, thank you.
Yes, question?
The discovery process and then using augmentative type communication boards or using an iPad to help them stay in visual, needs a lot of visuals, needed an iPad to help keep her on track, but they did not say that the employers would be open to that. What can we do to help that gap for her to then be able to stay employed and be on task? Because she just needs the visuals, a lot of visuals.
A lot of employers, as you know, are just not familiar with what accommodations work for individuals.
Right.
So a lot of that is just sitting down with that employer or that HR person and explaining the benefits, demonstrating.
Who does?
VR counselors can do that, the
Okay.
provider person can do that,
Okay.
yeah.
So we just need to keep that dialogue going, right?
Yes.
So many deaf universities, the people live here, signings people live here in Florida, and they've been complaining about VR and the system and how it works. A lot of people are still waiting and been trying to contact their VR counselors, trying to email them and get in touch with them, but they are delayed in hearing anything from them. So they decided to go into the office physically, and of course, no interpreters, no appointment, just going in and getting in touch with the VR counselor, and they're like, the VR counselor's not here, they're really, really busy. And we feel like we're being ignored sometimes, and we feel like sometimes the services aren't great and they're pretty lousy, and we get upset with that. And I guess it's because, you know, a lot of the counselors don't know how to sign, or there's no staff interpreter on site, and we get very frustrated. We feel like we're left out and ignored in the deaf community, and we get frustrated. We feel like the hearing people with disabilities can communicate and speak and have a level of equality, but we feel like it's not fair and that we're lessened, I guess, and it's a frustrating thing that we've been dealing with in the deaf community.
I understand your frustrations totally, and that's something that we certainly have to work on if that's, what's happening out there. I know that Cecil's worked hard to make sure that we have some staff interpreters in place and the continuous training with all of our staff, but there's always room for improvement. The other piece I will tell you is our ombudsman. If you have a problem with VR, your counselor, a decision that's been made, you don't agree with it, call our ombudsman. If you go to that rehabworks.org, you will see a link to get to our ombudsman. And they are there to contact the counselor and to basically facilitate between you and the counselor whatever issue's going on. Even if it's as simple as them not communicating with you or not being able to reach, that's their job. We're there to help you all.
Another question real quick, you said that there's money and funding, we have to wait for the funding and before we get services, why is that?
I'm not sure I'm understanding your question.
Well, typically, like, VR counselors say, we're still waiting, we're waiting to get that check from VR and headquarters before we can proceed with the case, or before we can give you what you need. And so sometimes you have to keep waiting to make sure that the money is ready and available before our VR counselor gets it, before we can move forward. So again, I feel like we're getting ignored. Is that normal for everyone else to be waiting for the money to
It's
get
normal.
There is a process that we have to apply by. We have to meet state procurement and purchasing requirements. So it has to go through a lot of checks and balances also. Because this is your all's tax dollars at work. So we can't just be throwing it out. We have a very rigorous process we have to follow. So when authorizations are done, they do have to go up through Tallahassee electronically. All this stuff happens before it gets back to the field. And we're actually working to try to streamline that process. But there's a lot of checks and balances that we have to have in place for auditing purposes.
well, letting you know there are a lot of parents and children being born, and our community is growing. Our future is important, and it's a concern for, we have a lot of children that are gonna be coming up in the future. It's getting worse and worse. Obviously, there's not enough money. It's just these specific issues are.
I agree. There's not enough money. Question in the back?
Well, that's kind of a question and a statement. The gentleman in front who's upset about, the funding and the process and everything like that, I will say this, be patient, because VR does work. My son is a living testimony of the fact that it works. It is a process, but if you're patient and work through the process, it will happen. But my question is, now that he's going through the process, one of the things that we have a question of that we're trying to get for is that continuing education. Do we just have to keep on staying on the counselor and working with her? Can I go out and secure the continuing education for him and ask for VR to pay for it, or how does that work?
No, anything that, basically we can't retroactively pay for things. This is why I talked about the individual plan for employment. That IPE has to list those services, the providers, that way it's approved, then we can authorize for the service. Someone comes in after the fact and says, hey, I went to school last year, can y'all pay for that now? We're not going to. I wanted to introduce Cayman. Come here, Cayman.
I'm Cayman.
Yeah, this is Cayman. Cayman's one of our success stories.
Yeah.
It's a very good success story. You want to tell them where you're working, what you're doing?
I'm working at Lowe's in the garden center. It started out slow because it was a process. Took it from start to finish. I started in June. Went in the same, tried to go to the orientation. Then in June, process, then worked with different providers like psychiatrists for different things, and then like a job placement thing, like job aptitude test to show where my interests were, and it turned out my interests were either animals or outdoors, so I went to the garden center and progressed, and I saw a therapist for a while to help me with different social skills that I was lacking, and then we progressed, and I was signed a job coach who was amazing. She helped me with applying for jobs, helped me with interview skills. Then I went, and then after about, it started in January, and then within a month I had a job because I applied myself and made an effort to get the appointment. If you wanted to quit, once you get through all the steps you need to go, if you want a job, you have to apply yourself. You can't just wait. You have to, if you get a job, you have to work with your job coach to find places you want to work. And then it took and after I started interviewing, it took me about a week. I went into Lowe's on open interview thing where you go to set time for the interview. I went in for the interview, talk about my experience with something, and basically it was assistant manager. The assistant manager was like, I'd like to offer you the garden center part-time position on the spot. And now my job coach is coming weekly to make sure my job is going okay, help me out. Everybody seems to be nice there. I'm working more, I'm gonna try to talk about what we have counselors to try to get what we have to pay for school so I can go to horticulture, the horticulture class, and then eventually become a plant specialist at those. It's one of my goals right now.
So this is a, yeah. David is an excellent example of that career advancement. You know, he's in at Lowe's, you're enjoying the job, right?
Yeah.
Obviously the plant and the gardening is a love of yours.
Yeah.
So in order for him to move up that career ladder, he may need some additional classes. So that's something to come back to VR, let us work with him, get some of those specialization classes so that he can continue to move up. And that's proud dad back there.
Yeah, and I wanted to say something to the parents in here and everything like that. With Voc Rehab, it is a process. You are going to get frustrated, but the life change. I'm not talking about just like, oh, he got a job. The life change that this child has experienced from the time of the process, from them getting him the counseling and the therapy that he needed to get the social skills and the anger management and the money management skills and all the little processes along the way has changed him in just 1 year, has changed his life completely. So you hear all these negative stories about Voc Rehab and how it doesn't work or whatever. I would venture to say, and I'm not saying that about anybody in here, I would venture to say that 90% of those people that get frustrated with Voc Rehab and say it doesn't work, bail before they try to see things through tuition. They just, you know, I'm not saying that's always the case, but I'm just saying in my experience of what I've seen, you know, and my son, like I said, I'm proud dad, living example of how well Voc Rehab works.
Do you have a question?
No, I just wanted to say my daughter is in Florida Keys Community College and thriving with her great job there thanks to VR.
Good.
Yeah.
We have a lot of success stories and we're all very proud of that, but we also have unsuccessful stories. And I mean, that is part of it, and Voc Rehab can always improve. My staff have heard me say this a million times. We do things great, but we also do things that we don't do so great. So we're always striving to work and to make those improvements. But honestly, the feedback we get from you all, the customers and the parents, is what helps us continue to improve. Do you have a question?
So speaking of feedback, and when you have the different agencies and providers you do work with, say for Employ You, and I feel like the more we talk, the more what you just stated, the more we get the positive voices and the voices saying, okay, within reason, what can we do to fix it? How do we become a part of the solution and not continue with frustration, which only adds to the problem? So what do you have in place to get those voices heard? To get the connections between Employ You, between the providers, between you and to us? What is being done in a systematic manner to increase the improvements needed?
Right, so we have a Florida Rehabilitation Council. The FRC is actually required by federal law, so every state has a rehab council. That rehab council consists of individuals with disabilities that have gone through our services, businesses, employer reps, agency reps. They meet quarterly, and they move around the state at different meetings. But also part of that meeting is a public workshop, public comment period, so anybody can attend those meetings and talk about concerns, issues, those kind of things. You also have the ombudsman that I talked about a minute ago with this gentleman that you can contact. They're a great resource. They also look at those trends, you know, what's the trends that they're hearing, and that helps us identify if it's coming out of a certain office, you know, because when you have 96 offices and almost 1,200 employees across the state, consistency is a little hard. And that's something that we continue to work on, is that consistent. Whether you're in, you know, Panama City or if you're down in Miami, we want that experience to be similar, although it is individualized, but we still want that process to be similar, and so there's still a lot of work that has to be done with that. And then I'm always available. You know, anybody can always contact me. But your counselor, each of those counselors have a unit supervisor, they have an area supervisor, and they have an area director. So there are levels there that you can go to if you want to talk, sit down and talk with those individuals. Yes?
Yes, ma'am. Can you speak to something we found, and we moved into the state less than a month ago, or sorry, less than a year ago. but we were told, and we've gotten from other places where they can, other VRs in different states, you can do the job, which we focus mostly on here, and at the same time maintain educational benefits. So I've got a young man that's in Valencia Community College doing that locally, and so VR is paying for that. We looked into the job services, and we were told you can't do both concurrently. So he can't do a part-time job while he's attending Valencia, so we kind of pick one or the other. And again, we came out of Alaska, not a problem. We came down here, something different. Could you speak to that? Just
It's one of my pet peeves.
Pardon?
It's one of my pet peeves.
Okay. It's just state policy? Is something you
No.
legislate?
My staff know this, we've had conversation about this, and we're trying to figure out a way to articulate this to staff. We all know in today's age that a lot of people have to have a job to have that money coming in. That's one thing. So how many college kids have to have a job? Almost all of them. Yeah, should have a job. Also, the job, whether it's not their vocational goal, but just working, is developing those skills that they need that's gonna pay off at the end. So that's something that I'm passionate about. I have 2 jobs myself. I also teach for a university. So I understand the need to have that job while you're pursuing your ultimate goal. And it's hard for staff to understand this because for so long it was just like one job only, that's all we can do. In my opinion, that is not the goal. You know, him working while he's in school, that within itself is just helping him to be a better employer once he reaches his goals. So if I were you, I would go in and sit down to your counselor and say, here's the reality of it. And then you could really pull out the card and say, well, Allison Flanagan says.
We actually did that and brought the national in, and said, oh, it doesn't work that way. So
Yeah, not nationally,
I
they're not gonna
appreciate
give
it.
a lot of guidance on that.
Okay.
But, I mean, the world's changed. Back, you know, when I first started in rehab, it was all focused on the one job, that was it, that's all you could do. But we know that the economy has changed, everything has changed these days, and so VR has to change with it. And most government entities, we change very slowly. That's not something I'm proud of, but there's so many bureaucratic levels, we change slowly. But that's something we're trying to incorporate. It's a philosophical change, honestly.
I appreciate that, thank you.
Yeah.
I actually have a solution for you.
Sure.
So, we were talking about this the other day in our office, and we were sending a kid to school and paying $6,000 in placement benchmarks. And that job, $6,000, it does not end up in a goal. It's just kind of wasting
Preparing
money. So
Yeah.
I'm thinking about it, and I'm like, why don't we, when the kid's in school, put him in an OJT related to the school he's going to, and most likely, at the end of the OJT, he will be able to continue working part-time in that job. It's a perfect solution. But I just thought of it 2 days ago. So.
See?
Now you
See?
can spread that
My leaders are
statewide.
starting to hear the message, so it's good. Yes.
Your son. To you particularly because were you ever frustrated that they would not give you the apron to sign saying that your case is closed? That's the job that you have right now.
I haven't, but I'm still working. I'm getting ready to close. I don't know when I'm closing because I've only been on the job like a little bit over 3 months. It hasn't been that long since I've been on the job. And they already have something in place when I'm done. I already asked for that services, like the job, on-the-job training, so I can get, the on-the-job training will help me get
Next level.
to get to the next level, becoming a plant specialist.
I'm staying with you right now because I'm frustrated because they don't let my mother get the paper saying that my case is closed.
He's a contact and be vigilant.
That's right. Cayman's a good spokesman, isn't he? We've got about 5 minutes. Any other last questions? Or I'll be hanging around here if you want to talk to me afterwards. Yes.
I have a question. I come from Miami and I'm a parent of a legal guardian of a young girl with Down syndrome who's 24. I didn't have a good experience with VR. The office that I had, I first had a counselor that when we went and meet, then she said she was going to prepare a plan and get back to us. Took 3 months and a year, nothing happens. I was able to help my daughter find a job. So we went again to VR and asked for help with transportation and equipment because she was at a restaurant and she needed some special shoes. And the lady says, oh, I need to write another plan and a new plan with this new information. 3 months after, she called saying that she didn't have the money to pay for the shoes, and I said, she lost the job. I mean, I couldn't keep up with it. You didn't help it. So I'd like to know if I could switch offices or what else I should do to make VR support my daughter in the way that it's supposed to be supported. Because
Your
right now she
example-
couldn't keep up with the job, and,
Right.
and
Your-
she's
your ex-
supposed to. It's still open for her.
Your experience is definitely not what VR is about, and I apologize for that, but I do know it happens. If you, when we finish, if you will come up and talk to me so I can get your name and number so I can follow up with the case and contact that local office.
Because I really would like to do is to be switched to another office, because I tried to reach out to the supervisor of that office,
Okay.
and it's a ghost. I couldn't talk to her. And I'm an advocate, and I've been an advocate during current time, for the kids that I had in the school, and they have IEPs. But with VR, it's so
If you
bad.
see Debbie right there beside you?
Yes.
Deb, she will take your contact information so we can follow up.
Thank you.